Hello everyone, this is Incite and Excite, here to review The Curse of La Llorona. Let me just say, go watch this film. It's scary in the standard horror movie sense. It creeps you out and offers terrifying scenes. If you get scared easily, or don't see obvious signs coming. And I'm not talking shit. I'm one of those people who get scared easily, even though I see things coming. I can't even watch that new Conjuring trailer because that under the cover scene, that shit is scary. But overall, the movie is enjoyable. But my biggest complaint is that it's too generic and it misses what I would say the point of the character La Llorona. And I'm not really gonna dwell into like what the actual folktale, because of course it varies, from town to town, basically town to town. So I'm not gonna dwell on that. But I am gonna talk about how it misses opportunities to enhance the actual horror aspect of the story, especially since it's trying to portray it as another evil entity in the universe. And that brings my other point that I didn't even know that it was connected to the Conjuring universe. That was a surprise to me. And yet, kind of a letdown because I now think like this movie could not exist without it being connected to it. But I still think it's a nice addition. So, alright, let's get started with the little foundational notes. How should you judge a movie? Well, it's kind of simple. Did it meet your framework for the movie? And by that I mean like, the trailers didn't lie to you. Did it follow the an outline formula for horror movies? Stuff like that, right? And structurally, did the movie have a coherent story that progresses naturally? Which basically means A led to B, which led to C, which led to D. If so, this movie works fine. Which The Curse of La Llorona meets the criteria. It's it's a basic film that makes sense, kind of makes sense. I'm not gonna talk about specific aspects where he's like, oh, this wouldn't really make sense, or if a ghost, an evil spirit entity, was in a pool full of holy water, why wouldn't it die, right? If it is affected by holy water. So I'm not gonna talk about that. But say you want to dig deeper narratively or like structurally. Does this movie have untapped potential? Yes, it does. But to be fair, all films do. And it's easier to criticize after the fact. And I don't want to be that guy like, oh, this movie should be like this. But I do think it is okay to discuss alternatives to how the film was made that would actually enhance the film. Because, from my opinion, the seeds were there, they just didn't let it grow. And it's kind of a big shame because if you want to make these type of movies, I know like they're guaranteed money, like the budget wise and how they perform in theaters. But in the long run, you want to build an actual connection to an audience. At least that's what I would think, and that's how I'm going to view this film and how I'm going to critique it. So I would say my thesis for this video is that The Curse of La Llorona does not use narrative plot points to enhance any message to create meaning for the viewer that they can use to reflect on their personal life, which would add that layer of actual horror while watching the film. So let's get started with the obvious. The first point I want to bring up is La Llorona is just an evil ghost. And of course, you can say, oh, well, it is fact. She's just a ghost. She roams around looking for kids to kill, right? Or to snatch, or whatever you actually believe she does. But let me elaborate on. Okay, so the movie says The Curse of La Llorona. And I say curse here. That's the key word there. And a curse is, you get screwed over by an outside force. And you kind of see that because, the other mother whose children actually do die in the film, she prays to her. So she basically sets the curse for the protagonist, the mother. But how it's executed is just La Llorona is just a ghost that's gonna take your children, but she's not just a ghost or a spirit, right? She has influence, and people can influence her just by praying to her, which is really interesting in that aspect. But they didn't really touch upon it very much. La Llorona is just characterized as a monster, which ultimately dies as a monster, and that just creates this movie as a generic monster of the week setup, which again could have gone deeper. And so let's go on to the next point. So here's my main strife over this film, which is highlighted in the first act. The protagonist, the mother, who is also a grieving mother, mirrors La Llorona, with, of course, some circumstantial differences. But the possibility of the mother becoming evil is there, right? She's stressed out. She's not in a good, I would say, good headspace. She's grieving. Obviously, she's mourning her husband. And I like that scene where you see her cry, which again builds that connection with La Llorona. And this is what I mean, like, the film just makes her into a ghost when she could have been an influencer of people, of mothers. So instead of her being the thing that takes the kids or kills the kids, she makes the actual mothers kill the kids. And that in itself makes this movie that much better. Because now it's not just a being that you can recognize, but now it could be your mother. It could be your, if you're old enough, your sister who has kids, right? I even thought that that would occur in this movie. Like, why else show a grieving mother? Because it is never brought up in any significant or narratively significant way, except for a reason for the daughter to grab a doll that her father gave her for courage. Remember that scene? Didn't it just drive you insane? La Llorona, again, just a spirit, and it's dealt with in the same tropish methods that you have seen a million times, which highlights the problem. It's just a ghost movie. But we see it control children, similar to the Pied Piper. But what really would have worked better would be a manipulation of emotions in the mother. Anger, jealousy, sadness, any emotion that could be amplified if she attaches to you. That now creates the internal and external conflict. You know, a conflict that would really connect with the viewer. Like, and if we really wanted to create significant conflict, we could have had the mother had to struggle with herself being tempted to kill her own children. You see how now this movie becomes like a million times better. And that's what I mean. Like, this is like the movie had the potential because all the aspects of the folktale of La Llorona can now be present in this mother. Now I am going to assert that the protagonist needs to mirror the antagonist, who in the end made a different choice. A choice that is acceptable if we have a happy ending, or unacceptable if a tragic ending. This is a core aspect I hold in films, especially in horror films. So what do I mean? You are supposed to learn from the protagonist's choices. And if you just tensed up, relax. I'm not saying a movie needs to shout a moral to you, but a viewer should be able to construct a moral from watching a movie. But this movie just ends. after receiving help from an unorthodox man of God, with the protagonist stabbing La Llorona, the movie just ends with the curse over. Or is it? Because they had that stupid maybe it's not over shot, which again, dumb. And if you can, leave a comment on what the moral or theme of the film is. And it can't be a mother protects her children, or a mother should protect her children. It has to go deeper in that. What is this movie's message? What is it arguing, right? So, if you have something, let me know. So now I want to say that this movie is built up to fail. And let me be clear, I don't mean fail financially, just by narrative standards. I know this movie made bank for a horror movie. Let me just add that little note there. So, look, again, another very missed opportunity. The protagonist's world, right? Her world is that she's a CPS worker, which is great. It's a nice connection that puts her in a world involving children. She sees the worst in people in regards to children. Great. This is all good. And for a brief second, she is placed into that world as on the opposite side. She's investigated by her own peers. But the problem is, it's just for a second. This is where the film should have dived deeper into this. Build drama, build conflict. But they didn't. Instead, they ran to the church to fix the problem. She should have entered the world of horrible parents. Yes, I'm saying it. The protagonist should have been a bad mother, or at the very least got her feet wet. This would add the extra character dimension that she so desperately needs. I also want to bring up that I think this movie ignored the source material. So what do I mean by that? This movie really tries to hit your feels with the idea of children dying, either through explicit scenes or off-screen deaths. Dying sucks, especially when it happens to the young. But did you even really care in this movie? I like that one scene in the beginning where you see the human version of La Llorona drowning her child. It's scary because you really did not expect that scene to be on the screen. And that is what this film is missing throughout the entire film, unless you count that scene in the bathtub. So that's essentially just two scenes. I'm sure they were trying to be conservative with child death, but this is not the movie to be conservative. It is the source material that this movie depends on. Mostly everyone has a mother. All mothers have had children. This is where you tap into something that you can internalize with the viewer. Like the consequences of postpartum depression, or in this case, since La Llorona kills children, not babies, depression through life-changing events. You show the idea that was always on the back of the mind of the mother. But we're just given a monster movie, a generic, no substance, no takeaway of a movie. And I have a problem with that. So if you're going to make a horror movie about a thing that kills children, have children die in this movie. Not one in the past that you have no real connections with, and not two that you don't even see die, but you know they're dead because you see their bodies, right? If anything, one of her children should have died. And that would have been like that breaking point where the protagonist has to make a choice. Either, she succumbs to it or she overcomes it. And again, see, all these aspects were in this movie, but they didn't use anything. They just made it where, hey, there's this thing that's trying to kill us, let's kill it. So now that that all has been said, can you see how basic this plot is? Simple plots can be good, but come on. After you walk out of the theater, you will forget this movie. But again, I still recommend you go watch it. And I hope you don't think this criticism is bitching. Just be conscious of lazy writing. Demand more. All right, guys. Thank you for if you made it this far. I really want to thank you. Leave a comment, like, subscribe, and again, if you can pull out a theme out of your ass on this movie, write it down, and I'll actually think about it. I will probably make a video on it if you can give me an actual theme for this movie. All right, later, guys.